It feels like Mercury is retrograde, and it's not. Sometimes I think retrogrades are a personal phenomenon. You know, if it feels that way to you, well, so be it, then it is. Welcome to Soul Food Coffee House in Redmond, Washington, and it is the last Wednesday night of the month. It is Wednesday, October 26th, 2016, and we have an interesting month ahead, as we often do, but you know, I think we have a more interesting month behind. What a crazy month it was. And if you remember, for those of you who were here last month, I said that October begins with eyes open wide, good news, Jupiter abounds, everything's cool, and I said by the middle of the month we're going to wonder what planet we've walked off from and onto. My exact words were, if you thought it was weird, and of course I was referring particularly to the presidential election, and I said, if you thought it was weird, you have no idea, we have no idea, we're not going to be able to make it up as to how weird it's going to get. And all I got to say is, it did. And I also said that the new moon at the end of the month, and of course we're recording for November, but it is October 26th, I said it'll get even weirder. I'm standing by that. We have another wave of weirdness over the next week, and I don't think anyone can predict it because nobody could have ever made this shit up the way it was. I mean, my God. Okay. So, tonight we have two things to cover. We have the month ahead, as we always do, and oh, my prophetic powers see coffee on the way. Thank you, Eric. Thank you. All right, so, a few things we got tonight to cover. We have, obviously, the month ahead, and there are some interesting things to talk about, and a definite break of energy from where we have been in the past. Secondly, and I think I'll do it firstly, is I do have the charts of the two presidential candidates, and I've been resisting this and fighting it, and I talked a little bit about it a few months ago, and I made so many enemies I can't even believe, and I'm going to do that again tonight. So we will see where that goes. Hopefully I won't get in too deep, but it's to not talk about that would be avoiding my job as an astrologer, which is to help us understand what whatever is going on. And there we go. All right. And the third thing is, and I'll do this very quickly this month, but I just want to run through very briefly a couple of events I have coming up. At the top of the list, and I'm mentioning this probably for what will be the last time, on January 20th through the 29th, I'm leading a 9-day workshop retreat in Goa, India. This is the magical spot of India. It's on the left coast, on the west coast, about a few hundred miles south of Mumbai. Indians go there to play and to relax. It's a seaside town, area, state. We will be at a resort on the beach, and everything will be taken care of from the time you arrive to the time you go. The title of that is Experiencing the Spiritual Dimensions of Astrology. What a place to teach that. I've been doing long-form workshops in astrology for about 10 years or so now, and I'm more excited about this than I have been about any of the other workshops I've done in the United States, in Indonesia, Bali, and Mexico. This one's going to be cool. But pushing toward the end of this month, November, it's going to kind of be locked in place because the rooms will need to be assigned in advance. And so if you're interested at all, both all you here tonight at Soul Food and those of you on the internet, send me an email, get in touch with me, because if you're interested, we need to talk about it and make sure that you don't get closed out. It's going to be a blast. All right, back closer to home, November 18th through the 20th this month, I'll be participating along with 48 astrologers from around the world in an online astrology conference, the 4th annual Breaking Down the Borders. And the speakers will be from literally all over the English-speaking world. Astrologers will be giving lectures from their living rooms, as I will. And these will be interactive. There's actually going to be a hall, set up so that the people who are participating, in the conference can actually hang out and chat with each other. But there will be astrologers that will be lecturing from the United States, Australia, New Zealand, South America, Canada, Europe. It definitely will be an international event. And you can find out more about that by going to Astrology Conference, one word, www.astrologyconference.org. For those of you who are local, the monthly Washington State Astrology Association holds its annual Christmas party. I'll tell you more about that next month. And I'll be the speaker at that, talking about astrology and Christmas and the origin of holidays and how they are astrological. And then for those of you who are more adventurous than going here to something in town, less adventurous than going to India, I'll be participating in a conference in Costa Rica, in Guanacaste, Costa Rica, on May 6th of 2017. And there will be teachers there that include Kai Pacha. Many of you probably know his weekly Pele report on the internet. Maurice Fernandez, Sol Jonassen from Bergen, from Norway, and people again from all over the world. You can find out more about that by going to Astrology Rising Costa Rica, one word. How is that one word? AstrologyRisingCostaRica.com. Okay, there's more, but that's enough. How did we get here?
I drove.
I don't mean that. I mean, how did we ever get to this place in this country where this is going on? I mean, the craziest, edgiest scriptwriter for the Twilight Zone could not have dreamed this one up. It just couldn't have. I mean, oh my God. So who the hell are these people that are running for president of the United States? We're going to spend a few minutes looking at them. I'm really just going to touch on a major piece on each of their charts. This is not intended to be an in-depth analysis. It's more intended to just understand a little bit about the nature of these two people. When I talked about them a couple months back, I had several people jump all over me online. Is that a possibility? They cyber jumped all over me. Anyhow, I had several people say, "You're an astrologer, you should be neutral and just tell us about their charts." And obviously my politics came through some, even though I was restrained, as I will be tonight. But it'll be very clear what I believe in and don't believe in. And I just want to say to those people who think that I should not be a human being and have a point of view, this is my YouTube channel. Okay, you guys came to hear me. I get to do whatever the fuck I want to. And you get to disagree, and you know what? If you disagree with me and put your posts up on the YouTube channel, I'll leave them there, as long as you're nice. And I don't mean as long as I agree with your opinions, because I'm all for difference of opinions. That's one of the things that makes this country great. Not that we need to make this country, what is it? Don't get me started. Okay. Make this country great again. You know, through voter suppression, misogyny, racism, capitalism, and I don't know, and militarism and whatever. Let's look at these two charts to try to see who this guy Donald Trump is and who this woman Hillary Clinton is. First of all, when I look at a chart, I usually see something that jumps out at me. And I must say that both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but did you ever notice that the media and everyone refers to Donald Trump by his last masculine name, Trump? No one calls him Donald, well, but they say Trump this, Trump that, and yet when referring to Hillary Clinton, they tend not to say Clinton, they say Hillary. Just an observation. All right, so we're looking at Donald's chart, and as an astrologer, the first thing I notice is that he was born with a moon in Sagittarius opposite his Gemini sun. When the moon and sun are opposite, here they are within 1.5 degrees or so, that is what we on Earth call a full moon. So the first thing I see is Donald Trump was born at he's a Gemini with a full moon in Sagittarius. Alright, so Geminis, as you may know, are the con artists of the zodiac. Gemini, Bob Dylan, who's in the news this week because he was awarded a Nobel Prize and disappeared. He's gone. I mean, he will not answer the phone, he will not accept it, he will not turn it down. He's gone rogue. So Dylan is a classic Gemini. Paul McCartney, the clever one of the Beatles. I mean, I say not necessarily the deepest, but the one who had the most words and the cleverest things. Geminis are the tap dancers. They are the con artists because they can talk out of both sides of their mouth. Bob Dylan would give interviews back in the early days where he would tell completely contradictory stories to an interviewer 10 minutes apart. Okay, so we have Trump, who is a Gemini. Geminis are fast-thinking, they're clever. But he has a full moon in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is the sign of believing things. It's the sign of, it's the cavalier, philanderer, adventurer, the person who's going to the other side of the world on an adventure. It doesn't matter whether they get there, it's the trajectory that matters. And Donald Trump is a classic Gemini with a full moon in Sagittarius, except there's two extenuating circumstances that change everything. One is that Donald Trump was born with the sun conjunct within 5 degrees of the planet Uranus. The sun lines up with Uranus for a few days every year. Uranus is the planet of crazy, brilliant, eccentric, futuristic, out-of-the-box, radical, rebellious, other than normal, unreliable, eccentric. Uranus is lightning striking. And when lightning strikes, you can't stop it, and you can't control it, and you can't predict it. And if you live through the strike, you laugh, because it releases energy. And that's what lightning does. It invigorates because it expresses energy that is repressed, buried, or hidden. Got that? So he's a Gemini, a talkative, interactive, clever, tap dancing, opposite sides of an issue, Gemini. And I'm not saying that Geminis are bad. I mean, some of JFK was a Gemini. Walt Whitman, the brilliant poet. I mean, there are many. There's no good or bad with signs. All right. The other piece, though, is not only was his sun lined up with Uranus, which gives him that erratic wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and Twitter because he's got a bellyache or something, but the other thing, the last thing here is perhaps the most important thing, and it has to do with these headphone-looking symbols here and here. You astrologers will recognize that these are the nodes of the moon. The nodes of the moon are where the orbit of the sun, the orbit of the Earth around the sun intersects the orbit of the moon around the Earth. And when you have a new moon or a full moon close to the nodes, you have an eclipse. Donald Trump was born on a full moon total eclipse, a total eclipse of the moon with the sun lined up with Uranus, you cannot get much less stable than that. And that is really the most, and again, I'm not even addressing his horrific politics or anything. I'm not addressing his misogyny, his racism, his capitalism, his greed, his meanness, all these things that, for me, offend me. But this is America, and you get to believe and vote for the person that you feel is right. If you feel that building walls keeps out things that you're frightened of, people, then that's up to you. And I understand that. But I don't understand hate and greed and separation, alienation and so on. But, see, I told you it would just slip out. I can't help it. But regardless of what your politics are, what I said about his chart is his chart. And there is one other thing that I want to mention, and that is the fact that he was born, you know why we have an accurate birth time for Donald Trump? Because during his craziness of trying to convince the world that our black president was actually a Muslim born in Africa, he showed his birth certificate. So we know his birth certificate. And he was born with Leo the lion roaring, his mane, his hair. He is such a Leo rising. But he was born with the planet Mars lined up with the horizon. At the time of day he was born, that year, Mars, in the very last degrees of Leo, was coming up over the horizon. Mars, the god of war, the god of anger, of fighting, of feisty, of impulsive, red-hot energy. Questions? There's more, but that's enough. No, one other thing. This conjunction of Venus and Saturn, which different people express the same energy very differently. Venus is the planet of money. It's the planet of valuable things. Venus is the planet of love and of beauty. In his chart, Venus is lined up with Saturn. Saturn is the planet that holds back. It's the planet that constrains energy, crystallizes energy, holds it in, tests it. It's heaviness, it's gravity. Saturn is authority. Saturn is Satan. It's you get what you deserve. Donald Trump's chart has Venus, the planet of love, beauty, and money, lined up with Saturn, the planet of holding it in. Now, this is indicative of someone who may be, not is, but may be alienated or alone or lonely. It's indicative of someone who sometimes doesn't have the finer things in life because Saturn holds back that energy of Venus. However, Donald Trump has an interesting company with this particular aspect, as long as we're looking at people who have built up great wealth, and that is Bill Gates. Also has Venus conjunct Saturn. It's someone who knows how to hold on to money. But it also can be someone who doesn't have any. So we have to be careful how we interpret things, but I do find that aspect indicative of another part of him, and perhaps can speak to the motivations of why he has amassed an empire and a collection of Venus units, whether it be in the form of wives or homes or opulent apparent wealth. This is all, I think, part of that. All right. Anyhow, let's move on to Hillary Clinton's chart. And again, because the time of day is what tells us what the rising sign is and the houses, we don't have a clue. And anyone who will tell you, this is Hillary's chart, I know, doesn't. Because I've heard some of the top astrologers in the world at this conference a couple weeks ago basically say, this is her chart, and then someone else says, yup, that's what you think, but this is her chart, and here's why. The fact of the matter is that the slower moving planets barely move over the course of a day. So there are some very important things we know about Hillary Clinton. Number one, we know that she is a Scorpio, a sun sign Scorpio, and in fact, what's today's date? I think we should sing happy birthday to Mrs. Clinton, or Ms. Rodham, as she's been known. Anyhow, so today is Hillary's birthday, Hillary Clinton's birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, Hillary.
But here's the thing about Hillary Clinton's chart, and I must say, I started to say this before, that with Donald Trump's chart and Hillary Clinton's chart, both of these charts are extraordinary. You look at 100 charts, I look at 100 charts. You look at 100 charts, and you'll see 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 charts that are like, oh my God. And these 2 charts both have that factor in them. Trump, because full moon with the sun, an eclipse, total eclipse full moon chart with the sun lined up in Uranus, makes it very unusual. Now with Hillary Clinton's chart, the thing that makes it unusual is not the fact that she's a Scorpio, it's the fact that she has a whole bunch of planets in Scorpio. She was born with the Sun and Chiron and Venus and Mercury all stuffed into Scorpio. And that's an interesting piece, but that's not the thing that's outstanding about her chart. But let's just start for a moment, what are Scorpios like? They're secretive. They're powerful, and they can be ruthless. Scorpios know how to hold energy in to give that energy power. This is very much the opposite of Donald Trump's chart, whose power comes from the immediacy of the moment and blowing the energy out at every moment. They're very different modalities. But the real power base of Hillary Clinton's chart, and please, I'm not judging this as good or bad, I'm just saying what it is, are these 3 planets here. These 3 planets are Mars, Pluto, and Saturn. It might be said that these are the 3 bad boys of the zodiac, or the planets, you know. Mars, the god of war. Saturn, the you get what you deserve planet. Saturn was the Grim Reaper. Saturn was the end of the road. You know, Saturn is Father Time, Kronos. It's but Saturn takes about 29 and a half years to go around once, around through the zodiac, around the sun. About 29 and a half years. The 3rd planet in that group is Pluto. Pluto takes about 250 years. Actually, it's closer to 243 years. But we'll say 250 because I'm not a Virgo. They would be accurate. So Pluto takes about 250 years to go around once. Saturn takes about 30 years to go around once. And when Saturn's gone around once, Pluto's moved a little bit further. So it turns out that Saturn catches up with Pluto about every 33 to 35 years. Just like from Earth's point of view, the moon catches up to the sun once a month. That's what a month is, 1 moon cycle to the sun. So Hillary Clinton was born when Saturn was lined up with Pluto in one of its 33-year beats. And my research has clearly, I went back to about a little bit over 2,000 years. And I took a timeline, historical timelines, and I laid them next to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction series. And the events that happen on Saturn-Pluto conjunctions are very powerful. I mean, we could go back in history, you know, to the crucifixion of Jesus, to Muhammad taking Mecca and creating the State of Islam, to the Moorish invasion of Spain. 500 years later, the Catholics kicked the Moors out of Spain. We could come up more into recent history and look at the colonial wars were mostly on Saturn-Pluto conjunctions or oppositions. And these conjunctions and oppositions are both powerful, and they're about 16 to 18 years apart. In fact, in the 20th century, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 1914 was within a few days of the shot in Serbia that started World War I. The next Saturn-Pluto conjunction was around 1947, on Hillary's birthday. Now, the thing is that these conjunctions, their effects historically last for about a year coming and going. And that period of time saw the foundation and formation of the United Nations. It saw the agreement to create Palestine and Israel as separate countries, and then the United Nations came in, and then boom, 1947, Israel was created and Palestine disappeared. Again, my point here is not judging these events, it's just reporting them. I do have judgments, but they're not all going to come out tonight. Interestingly enough, that Saturn-Pluto conjunction also was very close to India being granted freedom. We learned in school that, you know, peaceful, non-violent Mahatma Gandhi basically took the English Empire to its knees and India became free. Right? Story sound familiar? Well, they forgot to tell us that close to 1 million people were killed over the next year in battles between the Muslims and the Hindus. You see, Saturn and Pluto stuff is almost always belief system and religiously, you know, motivated. And that was that year. Oddly enough, if you follow Gandhi, back in 1898, when Saturn and Pluto were opposite, he spent the year in jail in South Africa. And then, the year he spent in jail with the salt marches, also that was in I may be off here, I think it was 39, but right in there, or 31. And that was the year that, right around that time, when Saturn and Pluto were aligned, was the coming of power of Hitler, of Mussolini, of Tito. It was the Chinese invaded, the Japanese invaded China. Okay, I'm making a point here that there's nothing lightweight about a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, whether it's historically or in someone's chart. In fact, this Saturn-Pluto cycle was in effect during the bombing of the World Trade Tower on September 11th. Saturn and Pluto were opposite each other. And they're coming back to be conjunct again in 2020, 21. And so we're electing a president right now that may in fact be in power during this next round. And we have years to talk about that. I'm not talking about that now. I want to come back to Hillary's chart. So, Mars is the god of war. In Hillary's chart, it's within a degree of Pluto. Pluto is the lord of the underworld. We are talking here transformation, deep, intense power. Historically, in astrology, Mars was the planet that ruled or was connected to Scorpio. In modern astrology, after the discovery of Pluto, we've given Pluto to Scorpio also. Because Mars, as the god of war, is certain, and passion, is really related to Scorpio, but Pluto is about the intensity that never goes away. It's a deeper, more powerful, more gut-wrenching, evolutionary process. If you think of the heat in the center of the volcano, that's the plutonic heat. Mars is a fire. See the difference? So in Hillary's chart, she's got Mars lined up with Pluto, lined up with Saturn, constraining and holding the whole thing in, and it's all 90 degrees or square to the cluster of planets in Scorpio. And therein you have Ms. Rodham or Mrs. Clinton or the Hill or whatever you want to call her. This is someone who what you see is not what you get. However, there is no inconsistency in her song and dance. Trump, what you see is what you get, but there's inconsistency. Do you understand the difference in these two charts, how radically different they are? And again, I don't want to drift into political diatribe here. I just wanted to talk about the most important things in each of these charts. Incidentally, also Hillary has a Pisces moon, which, although it sometimes doesn't get out, is certainly compassionate and has a water. I mean, let's not forget, Scorpio and Pisces are both water signs, and yet sometimes it's harder to perceive the emotionality of a Scorpio because it's so intense that Scorpios learn to hold the emotions in. They have to, otherwise they wouldn't have any friends. That's only partially true. They would have one. No. I'm a great fan of Scorpio energy, actually. My father, my daughter, some of the most wonderful people in my life. I sound like now, like a, oh, whatever. All right, let's go on. Was that helpful to understand the difference in these charts? I mean, one could spend hours, untangling the nuances. And in fact, at the conference, the ESAR conference I was at a couple of weeks ago, that's what happened. And as a point of, for me, there's a point of no return. I mean, one could be an astrologer, and these two panels pretty much unanimously, almost unanimously, agreed that Hillary would win the election. Well, duh. I'm not convinced, by the way. I don't think that we can believe anything that we get through the media, whether it's our point of view and making us feel good or not. And the problem with the way the media has become, at least from a governmental standpoint, is like you can, whatever you believe, you can find it justifiable. And I just don't believe polls say this percentage, that percentage. It's not that polls don't work. It's just that we don't get the story. All right, now I'm down off my political horse. Other than it's America, get your ass out and vote. We have a very low voting turnout compared to many countries. Okay, let's come back to here and now. And my favorite thing, as I've said from this podium before, is where is here? I mean, 30 to 60,000 people a month are watching this on YouTube. Where is here? They are here, or we are there. When is now? They're both moving points. All right. So what the hell is going on? I had this here a second ago. There we go. So we're going to start off with a chart of now, just because now, the end of October, even though we're talking about November, because we're coming into the last few days of November. We have Mars lined up with Pluto this week. That was the intensity of what came out around in the days prior to the full moon with Pussygate or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that for years I've been talking about the square between Uranus in Aries and Pluto in Capricorn. This is the stress and the tension on the aspect of the Uranus-Pluto conjunction that created the artifact that we call the 60s. And that's why the issues of the late 60s, sex, drugs, rock and roll, gender issues, then the rise of feminism, now gender equality and marriage equality, then civil rights, now civil rights. Then people demonstrating in the streets against the power structure, now the same. Ecology, then, now Monsanto and ecology still. I know I've missed some big ones. Oh, then the personal use of drugs, and and now the legalization. This election is not just a presidential election. You know, we have the fourth largest economy in the world, California, voting to make marijuana recreationally legal. Of course, here in Washington, we go, yeah, well, whatever. Life's the same. Except, well, yeah. All right, so this election season is very powerful because of a few things. We're coming off this Uranus-Pluto square that's been with us for years. 2010, 11, 12 is really when it exactly pumped up. 13, 14, 15 was the last of the exact 90-degree angles. And even though Uranus is now moving away from the square, it's 7 degrees away from being exact, we're going to get what's the word, resounding, the reverberations over the years to come every time planets move through the points that activate this now receding square. So this last week, we had Mars lining up with Pluto, and over the next couple of days, Mars, as it reaches 22 degrees of Capricorn, will still square Uranus. And so we're like in this instant replay, the end of October, about all these bigger issues. I mean, you know, we're like kind of having this instant replay flashback, if you will. One other thing I want to say, and I just want to, this could be an entire evening talk, but this little symbol right here at 22 degrees of Aries, lined up with Uranus at 22 degrees of Aries, this symbol is the symbol for the planetoid called Eris. As you may know, there were 7 visible planets, the Sun and the Moon, and then 7 visible planets altogether, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and that stood for hundreds, thousands of years. And then Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were discovered. But NASA tracks close to 500,000 identified objects that go around the Sun. Can you kind of just absorb that for a minute? And the reason why Pluto was demoted and then promoted and who the hell knows is that there are lots of things going around the Sun. When Juno was discovered in the 1800s, it was heralded as a new planet until Ceres was discovered. And then there were 2 new planets. And then they began discovering more and more asteroids. And then they think, well, these can't be planets. There are hundreds of them. Well, there are tens of thousands of them. And about 2,000 of them or so actually have names. So, Eris was discovered in the last, I'm not an expert on Eris, you can Google it and find out more, but I've begun to look at it in charts because it's so fascinating. It's very slow moving, it's almost half the speed of Pluto. But what's important here, because I don't want to fall into an Eris discussion, other than for many astrologers who have done a lot of research on Eris, they're saying that the fact that Uranus right now is lined up with Uranus is lined up with Eris. Uranus takes 84 years, so Uranus won't line up with Eris again for maybe another 95 years or so. Eris is the goddess of discord. Take that in. That this time things are different because not only do we have the Uranus-Pluto square still kicking up its heels, but Uranus is lining up with Eris. So over the next few days, as Mars squares Uranus, it will also square Eris. And then we come into the new moon at the end of the month. And then finally, it's time to go home. Finally, we get to talk about November. Now, the significant thing about November is this. There's not a lot of major activity going on, except there are 3 inner planets changing signs, and they do them all the same week. And this is hugely significant because when a planet changes signs, it kind of shifts the way in which it communicates its archetype to us. I think of the planets as characters with a personality. Mars is feisty and fiery. Mercury is curious and interactive. Venus is sweet and loving. Okay? Mars has been in Capricorn these last weeks. And in Capricorn, Mars is all business. Mars has an agenda. Mars wants to get to the top. But on November 8th, that's late in the day, election day is the 8th. So late that night, as polls are already closed, Mars moves from Sirius Capricorn into futuristic Aquarius, and where it will stay for the next 6 weeks or so. Mars in Aquarius is weird. See, Mars liked being in Capricorn because it was a you get what you deserve, and if you do the work, you know, and which I think favors Hillary. Mars in Capricorn does. Mars in Aquarius, though, if it favored anyone, would favor Trump. Why? Because it's that suddenness. The Aquarius is weird. It's out of the box. It's futuristic. Aquarius is other than normal. Aquarius is genius. Aquarius is when it's hot, and when it's not. So, Mars moving into Aquarius on November 8th is very significant because it's a shift in the landscape, it's a shift in the energy, and it really pushes us out of this kind of trudging, kind of trico, kind of plodding through what we've been doing to get to Election Day. And it's very strange that Election Day is over and all of a sudden, kapow! You know, we're free, in effect. And this is regardless who wins. Because people have these false ideas about Aquarius as being so cool. I mean, it is, all signs are cool. But the age of Aquarius, you know, where the power structure isn't above us and there's equality, and that it's intellectual because everything is part of the system and blah, blah, blah. That's all great until you realize that that describes the Borg or an ant colony. You know, there's a dark side of that Aquarian fully distributed consciousness that doesn't have the personality that perhaps other signs might. Which is why Aquarius wants to be part of the social system, but also wants to stand outside of it at the same time. That's Aquarius's big paradox. We'll talk more about that at the end of January when we come into Aquarius time. All right, so on November 8th, we have Mars moving into Aquarius. And then just a few days later, let's get this chart going here so we can go from November. Well, let's back it up and let's look at November 1st. We have the Sun forming a trine with Neptune. This is a dreamy day. This is a day when my friend Caroline Casey says that imagination lays the tracks for the reality train to follow. And Neptune is dreams, it's imagination. We have a tendency in the West to say, oh, that's just a dream, or he just made that up. Yeah, we made all this up. And in fact, you can't have it become real until you make it up. And so when the Sun trines Neptune on November 1st, it's like dreams are very present, and we have the ability to focus on which dreams are most important. Then, on November 4th, we have Venus coming into the picture, and Venus trines Uranus. Venus, the planet of love, Uranus, the planet of weird, eccentric, and releasing tension. This is trines are traditionally good deals. However, if Venus, the planet of love, is harmonizing with Uranus, the planet of anything goes, it might make sense to watch our steps just a little bit. Because we could have a crazy good time and then have cleanup the following day, weeks, months, years. But Venus trining Uranus on the 4th, I think is indicative of a nice day. Of the potential of doing something different and exciting. Then as we move closer to Election Day on the 7th, we have the Sun coming into a sextile with Pluto, and sextiles are supportive. This is a deeper energy. This is an energy, and again, how this plays out politically, I don't know, and I won't even guess. But Pluto is about deeper passions. It's about survival. And when the Sun harmonizes or cooperates through a trine or a sextile to a planet like Pluto, there's this kind of ability to move with the energy in a way that solidifies things, that does things in a way that has a lot of power. Now, depending upon which side of the political fence you're on, you can paint two very different scenarios with what I just said. But I would imagine that we will see some real strength coming out in those last couple of days from one or both of the candidates. Then on the 8th, by the time polls close, we have Mars here. This is a noon chart on the 8th. So we have Mars at 29.5 degrees of Capricorn. By the 9th, you can see Mars has moved from Capricorn into Aquarius. But on Election Day itself, we also have the Moon in Aquarius moving into Pisces. And so there's that electricity that is prior, but by the end, the moon moving into Pisces. We can do this an hour at a time. The moon actually moves into Pisces at around 6 p.m. And this is an Eastern time chart. So it's around the time of the polls closing. The moon moving into Pisces, there may be some shade being thrown about. Because Pisces can be, again, like Neptune, it can be dreamy, it can be imaginative, it certainly can be compassionate, but it can also be on drugs. And what I mean by that is that the polls are closing, this is at 6 o'clock, but by 7, 8, 9 o'clock the moon is well into Pisces, and so we may not be getting what the truth is. There may be stuff going on, and of course, if Hillary is to win, then we can assume that there will be some craziness coming, in reference to, everything's a fraud and whatever. And again, I don't want to go into that now. I'm just kind of painting the picture for Election Day. But I think it is significant that by later that evening, I had the time here, by 10 p.m., and this is Eastern time, the polls are already closed. By 10 p.m. Eastern time, that's 7 p.m. here in Seattle, Mars leaves Capricorn and goes into electric Aquarius. There's something that happens. And so I think we will see a clean break here. Hopefully it won't be someone's personality break. All right, let's go back to a day at a time and move this forward, because then by the 11th, we have another planet ready to change signs. We have Venus at the last degree of Sagittarius. Venus moving from Sagittarius into Capricorn on the 11th. And then we have Mercury moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius. That would be right here on the 12th. And so what we see now is by the middle of November, we're in a very different landscape. The landscape has shifted because the three inner planets, Mercury, how we think, Venus, what we like, and Mars, how we get to what we're going to go to. That came out wrong. Mars, how we get to where we're going. It's a good thing my editor can't edit me as I'm talking. She's a Mars in Virgo, and I can't get away with anything. but here I can make a total fool out of myself and say things wrong. Okay, so, but we have, by the 13th, we have Mars into Aquarius, we have Venus into Capricorn, and we have Mercury into Sagittarius. Each of these energies is distinctly different. And as I looked at this earlier today, because I always take a spin through the month ahead, kind of getting a feel for it, so I'm not looking at it for the first time here with you. But the thing that struck me this afternoon was, here we are, we're in the autumn time of year. The sun has moved, you know, on the autumnal equinox into Libra. Now we're in the middle of autumn. The sun has moved into Scorpio, the fixed sign. The fixed signs are the middle of each season. But the planets are ahead. Let's say the planets, I mean the little planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, are ahead of the sun, all moving direct, all moving ahead. And so we have Mercury moving into Sagittarius as the early antenna, going into the sign of Sagittarius, which is not yet winter, but the last sign of each season is ready to change to the next sign. So we kind of have that feeling of winter's coming, even though we're still, you know, even though we're still in autumn, and just barely to the middle of it. But Venus has moved into Capricorn, and that's the first sign of winter. And so we're already liking the idea of winter being here. Something has shifted. Again, because Venus is what we're drawn to, it's what we like. And Mars is well into Aquarius, which is the middle of winter. That's why it's so weird. It's like, in the middle of winter, you begin to think about spring, but it's colder than, you know what? Not necessarily here always, where we live in paradise. I learned a new word today, a pluviophile. People know what that is? A pluviophile is someone who loves the rain. It's a real word, and there's a whole lot of other pluvio words that I had no idea. All right. So, by the middle of November, things are really different, things are changed, and yet we're coming into one of the two lunations. Lunations are full moons and new moons, they are lunations. It's when the sun and the moon line up with the earth. The new moon, the sun and the moon are on the same side, and the full moon, the moon and the sun are on opposite sides. So what you can see here, we're coming into the full moon, and if I continue to move this a day at a time, that moon, if you just watch the moon here, the sun is in Scorpio, and as we move that along, the moon, back this up just a couple of hours now, to get this as close as we can, there we go. So there, the sun and the moon are both at 22 degrees, the sun in complicated Scorpio, and the moon in simplistic Taurus. This full moon is a turning point. It's the energy has gone as far as it can towards its complexity. That moon in Taurus is kind of like reminding us that we can pull the energy back. I want to say a quick word here about this little symbol here next to the sun, because I don't normally put this in charts. I do with client work some. But I spoke about her last month, and I got a number of people who commented to me on the internet about what I said or what I didn't say. And this symbol right here next to the sun at 20 degrees of Scorpio is Lilith, which is, Lilith is a real point, even though it's not traditionally used in astrology because people didn't know about it. And what it is that as the moon goes around the earth, as anything goes around a center, if it's elliptical, there are two centers. And the dark moon Lilith is the center of the ellipse that's not on the earth. It's the other center of the moon's orbit. And Lilith, I said something about Lilith, I don't even remember what I said, but I got a number of people who kind of read me the riot act, because I referred to Lilith in a traditional historical manner. Lilith was, going back to the Garden of Eden, she was the, how do we say this? She was pre-Eve. She basically said, I ain't taking this shit, I'm out of here. And so she is the disenfranchised, radical, wild, powerful woman that Sarah McLachlan and other people, you know, the Lilith consorts, you know, it's that feminine energy that does not rely on the masculine energy for its position, power, or place in the world. What I was told, and I checked out, and I don't remember the person's name who sent me this information. It actually came from a couple people, but thank you to them. Basically, and what I mentioned last month, and I did know, that Lilith appears through the Jewish tradition of the Midrash, which was was a commentary on the commentaries. These are like, you know, old smart guys sitting around, you know, kind of figuring it out. Lilith, historically, is not a pretty character. And again, I think this gets back to now in modern astrology, I sound like Trump, I'm not finishing a sentence. Okay, let's stop that. In modern astrology, Lilith is given a much more positive place because she is basically reclaiming her energy. But if you go back to her origins, it basically is described by the male power structure, and she's not nice. You know, and the reason why I'm mentioning it, I would have normally taken it out because I try to keep my charts relatively simple for these kinds of presentations. In my own work, I often use a lot more complexity in my analysis. The reason why I left it in, though, is that this full moon, the sun is conjunct Lilith. And I'm not sure exactly what that'll mean, but I think that this full moon will be important, and we'll see some energy around issues of gender equality, etc. Not that we don't every day, for those of us who actually look for it, but I think that there will be some stuff that will come out during that period of time that will be interesting. Let's move ahead and cover the last little bits of ground here. On the 18th, let's go back to a day at a time. On the 18th, we have Mercury forming, oh, we're not quite there. We have Mercury on the 18th forming a square with Neptune. I would say that this would be a good day to pay attention to what you are saying. Pay attention to what you think someone else is saying. It's a much better day to write a poem than it is to write a technical manual or sign a contract, because Mercury is logic, Neptune is dreams, and a square is a hard angle. It's a stressful angle, and it can be very creative. Let me just get rid of some extra noise here. Yeah, just making this less noisy. And so this square between Mercury and Neptune can be very disillusioning or illusioning. Now, the word disillusionment is not what we think it is, because what it really means is that we were living in an illusion, and then we were disillusioned, meaning that we were in reality. People don't like being disillusioned because illusions are a lot more fun. So, this Mercury square Neptune might be a day when we deal with some illusionment and or disillusionment. And what's interesting also is that Neptune is ready to stop its retrograde. The outer planets go retrograde for 4 or 5 months at a time, and I don't pay huge amount of attention to them. Because they move so slowly that often the retrogrades are subtle. However, I'm reminded that sometimes the most subtle things are also the most powerful. Excuse me. But this Mercury square to Neptune is happening as Neptune is slowing down from Earth's point of view, ready to turn direct. And so we may see some more things that we believe to be true that we find out are very different than what we believed. Disillusion. Then over the next couple of days, we go from Mercury's square to Neptune on the 16th to its conjunction with Saturn on the 23rd. Now, again, for those of you who have been listening to me for the last 6-8 months, you know a little bit about this now waning, now fading square between Saturn, the planet of boundaries, construction, wall, holding things together, reality, fear, alienation, Saturn, the planet that is authority. Over this past year, Saturn has been squaring, where am I? Saturn has been squaring Neptune, the planet of, where am I? The planet of confusion, the planet of no boundaries. And it's for this reason, this Saturn square Neptune, that we've seen the immigration issue be such a major thing, not just here, but the whole British exit from the European Union. It's all about xenophobia. It's all about fear of not having Saturn to keep the weirdness out. Saturn walls. We have Trump, who comes in and says, build walls to protect us because the walls are leaking. Leaking is imagination. It's dreams. You know, you can't control Neptune because it's imagination and dreams. So, even though that is beginning to settle down now, we have Mercury, which first squares Neptune on the 16th, squares Neptune on the 18th, and then conjuncts Saturn on the 23rd. And so we will see over the course of that week or so, we will see the difference of this kind of pie in the sky, everybody's cool, the imagination is wonderful, imagine there's no heaven, imagine there's no hell, imagine everything is Libras in perfect balance, to Mercury hitting Saturn and it's like, oh my God, we got to deal with this thing in reality. So often when Mercury conjuncts Saturn, it's like there's a reality check. There's like a running into a wall. We can become very rigid in our thinking, but there's also, it's an opportunity to see or to figure out what's real if we don't pull in so hard and just go to some belief system that is not based on reality. Now behind this we have another thing cooking that's actually a longer term pattern. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it now, but I'll be back on this over the months ahead, all the way through next summer, because the slower moving planets hold their patterns or because of retrogrades repeat over a longer time. And what I'm talking about here is Jupiter, which is now halfway. Jupiter moved into Libra just a couple months ago, but it's already halfway through the sign of Libra. It only spends a year there. So Jupiter's going to turn retrograde and then direct again. And right now, this month, Jupiter is going to make its first of 3 squares, 90-degree angles, to Pluto. The faster moving planet is the planet that makes the aspect to the slower moving planet. So we have Jupiter squaring Pluto for the first of 3 times on November 24th. And this looks like it might be the day before Thanksgiving. So what does this mean? Oh, let me give you the other 2 dates. It turns retrograde and goes over that exact same point and squares Pluto again on March 30th, 2017. And then it turns direct and it'll square Pluto for the 3rd and final time on August 4th. Now, this pattern, which kind of sits and holds, kind of like the Saturn-Neptune, the leaky boundaries issue, you know, which prompted not only Brexit, but perhaps a lot of Trump's popularity. Like that, this will hold, but the planets here are very different. Jupiter is about optimism, it's about potential, it's about growth, it's about going to someplace new and growing to bring that into our frame of reference. Jupiter can be philosophical. It's about traveling, whether we're traveling in our mind or whether we're traveling in the real world. You know, if you're going down to the corner store and home, that's a Mercury event. It's a back and forth. But if you're taking a 6-month journey and walking across Spain, that then becomes a Jupiter thing because it becomes a journey that opens you up and expands you in different ways. So Jupiter, the planet of expansion, growth, optimism, bounty, all these kind of opening things, joy even, moving through Libra, which is a relationship sign. So for this whole year with Jupiter moving through Libra, we will be looking at how do we grow in relationship. But that Jupiter squaring Pluto, Pluto is the dark lord of the underworld. Now, it's not bad news, it's just not the news you know. It's the stuff coming up and out. And so I would expect that even after election day, and it's setting up a deeper, longer thing that is kind of like a, I can think of Julian Assange, you know, or so many of the other people who have been involved in exposing information that's been hidden, because that's what Pluto is about, the underworld. It's the stuff we don't know. And yet with Jupiter squaring it, it might be a little bit of, too much information, but once we know it, we have to work with it and then grow with it. And so I think here we're coming on to something that is still, I mean, it's already building now. I mean, it's not, it's only, you know, a degree away from being exact now, a couple degrees away. But I think that it'll be by the end of the month, once we get that first taste of it, that next month we'll have something more to talk about and kind of begin to see what that might mean for the year ahead. I think the Jupiter square Pluto is powerful, and I think it's potentially very healthy, but I don't necessarily think it'll be easy. I think it'll bring stuff up that will actually kind of be stuff that we'll actually maybe have to deal with, and that might be a good thing. Right behind that, though, and not separate from it, as Jupiter is squaring Pluto, just a couple days prior, Jupiter squares Venus, and then Venus comes into Pluto. What does this mean? It means that there's money involved. It means that there's love. Venus close to Pluto, square, let's see, the Venus conjuncts Pluto on the 25th, the following day, and the Venus squared Pluto, why isn't that showing here somewhere? Venus conjunct Pluto, Venus squared Jupiter. It slipped through the cracks. I don't see it. Anyhow, it's right in that same period of time. And what it means is that we might be, there's something here about excess. Jupiter's too much. And it may be excessive spending. It may be because it's Pluto. We may discover Trump's taxes and that he really is not a billionaire. He loses everything. I'm not saying it's that. It could just as well be something with Hillary Clinton or something else. I don't know. But I do know that this is not a one-time event. What happens around that week of Thanksgiving, around that period of time that comes into the news, it's playwrights call it foreshadowing. It's something there that has a nugget of something that's going to be in our face for the next, 8, 9 months. Pushing toward the end of the month, the Venus-Jupiter that I wasn't seeing before is on the 25th. It was just one line down below where I looked and I wasn't there yet. But there is a bit of extravagance here. This might even be in our personal lives, having Thanksgiving dinners that are over-the-top, extravagant, overeating. Okay, that's every Thanksgiving. Wait a minute. Yeah. But there's something here with Pluto that's not. It's not easy to. I don't want to even use this word. Digest. It could be family dynamics that come out that give the whole thing a that was way too much. We didn't have to go there, but now it's there, and now we need to deal with it. Next month, you tell me, okay? The day following, actually on Thanksgiving itself, we're coming up to the 26th. On the 26th, which is the Saturday, we get that Mercury now trining to Uranus. It's almost like whatever we didn't want to know on Wednesday or Thursday, found out, had to grow with. Now we're not only cool with it, we're championing it. It's like what we didn't know before, now all of a sudden we want more of, because Mercury, intellect, communication, Uranus, open, the lightning striking and opening up, the heavens, kind of away. Uranus is often called in astrology Uranus the Awakener. And then we're coming into, as you can see, if you watch just the moon, we're coming into the new moon in Sagittarius. Oh, and we need to go back a few days because this event slipped through the cracks, and that is on November 21st. The Sun moves from the sign of Scorpio into Sagittarius, where Venus and Mars already have been. Mercury and Saturn already are there, and Sagittarius is that sign of open. It's the sign of the distance, it's far-seeing, it's the philosopher. And yet, like other planets that have moved into Sagittarius, including Mercury through the beginning of this month, it's a different flavor than the typical open, wide open, optimistic, happy-go-lucky Sagittarius, because with Saturn in the middle, each of those planets has to kind of bump up and get through the wall of Saturn's judgment. And so that same thing will happen with the Sun, but it's interesting that the Sun moves into Sagittarius, and we're kind of getting the buzz, but we also have Mercury lining up with Saturn, and so there's something holding us back. This time of year, when the Sun moves into Sagittarius, I always think it goes like this. In Libra, everything is in perfect balance. The leaves on the trees are pretty. There's that day where it's warm, but things are changing, and everything is like, oh my God, the colors are, everything's perfect. Scorpio, where we are now, and the holiday of Scorpio is what? Halloween. I mean, it was way before the modern calendar. And Halloween, this is the time of year when the veil is thin, the veil between worlds. And whether we call it the Day of the Dead, or whether we call it All Hallows Eve, disincarnate beings, even though we make light of it and play with the idea and do the trick-or-treating and eat sweets, all that's great. But the deeper thing is that the disincarnate beings, spirits, are roaming around this time of year, because as it gets deeper and darker, they are more apt to be perceived and felt and seen, or not seen, as the case may be. And so this time of year, when the Sun moves into Scorpio, those pretty leaves on the Libra trees all of a sudden are what? Dead. They're dried up, crispy. They're still maybe on the oaks, and they may still be on the trees, but they're no longer pretty. They don't have any life in them. And yet, this is the magic of Scorpio, because Scorpio is the sign of transformation. Oh, last month I said something about Scorpio being the scorpion, the eagle, and the dove, and I don't want to replay that whole thing, but someone said that traditional astrology, that's not the case. And I didn't mean it in traditional astrology, and I have not dug back in to see where my sources were on this, but this person said, and I'm sure rightly so, that what I said was not true. Well, it's true symbolically, and it's true, it's something that I didn't make up, I've read, and I can't really give the source. But the fact is that Scorpio is the sign of transformation. So you have the scorpion that has the poison in its tail and it stings out of instinct. And then what I had said was that as the scorpion learns to hold its energy in, it gets more altitude and becomes transformed into Aquila, the eagle, that you see in some of the medieval paintings. You see the fixed signs being held by the symbols, and you often see the eagle instead of the scorpion. But I don't know astrologically where that came in, and I'm not saying this is a traditional astrological substitution. I'm saying the idea makes sense, and then as the eagle learns even not to kill at all, think of it as a vegan eagle, it becomes the dove, which is total peaceful. So the thing about Scorpio is that when the trees, the leaves on the trees are dead, that is where the magic begins. Because in the hell realms, Pluto's world, Pluto, the modern ruler or a planet associated with Scorpio, in the hell realms, you see, it used to be thought that at Saturn, at death, it was over. But we now know that it's just a transformation. Many ancient traditions have known this forever. I'm not saying this like, oh, we just discovered this. We just remembered it. But the point is that something happens from the moment those leaves fall off the tree and look dead to the moment in Aries when the next cycle starts and there's green in creation. It's not like there's been nothing going on in between. There's been Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, and this is the unseen magical part of the zodiac, and Scorpio, in a way, is the harbinger of that magic and that mystical stuff. However, by the time we get to Thanksgiving, you know, and Thanksgiving is a Sagittarius holiday, no? Well, here's the deal. You know when Thanksgiving is celebrated? It's celebrated on what day of the week? Do you know what Thursday means? You know, the days of the week are planetary. 7 days of the week, 7 planets. There's the day of the sun, Sunday, Monday, Moon Day. In the Romantic languages, it's a little bit more obvious than in the Norse influenced languages or in the Scandinavian influenced languages. But, you know, there's Mercury, you know, what am I missing? Vanity, Venus Day. Two is, you know, two. But Thor was the god of thunder and the expansive god in the Norse mythology. And Thor's day is just Waves. Waves is Jupiter. It's Jupiter's day. So Jupiter is the planet that's associated with Sagittarius, right? So we celebrate a day of thanks, which is such a Sagittarian concept. It doesn't matter if we kill each other afterwards. I appreciate you and I think you're awesome. You're dead. Okay. But this idea of Sagittarian and its connection to Jupiter, we had people coming from another planet, might as well be, another side of the world, and they were welcomed by a people here, and they were celebrating and they were indulging. And this is all Jupiterian, Sagittarian kind of stuff. So we celebrate Thanksgiving Day. I like to call it Sagittarius Day. We celebrate it on Jupiter's Day, Thor's Day. We celebrate it on the first Thor's Day after the sun moves into the sign of Sagittarius. You can look at your calendar and see when does the sun move into Sagittarius. And that first Thursday after that is Thanksgiving. So, the deal, though, is that by Thanksgiving time, there's no leaves left on the trees. One day, all of a sudden, you realize, oh my God, all those dead leaves are gone, and I can see across the street and across the river and into the neighbor's bathroom. Oh, I didn't want to, you know, whatever. The point is that Sagittarius is what? It's about seeing far. There's no interference, because all the leaves are gone. The seasons and the weather really does correspond. So that brings us up to the new moon. Now watch the moon here. We're back here on November 22nd, and we have the moon here. Now I'm going to spin this forward a day at a time, and watch how every day the moon gains until the moon actually, now let's back this up just a couple of hours. And here you can see that the moon and the sun are at the same degree, and then the moon switches and goes to the other side of the sun. So, the new moon in Sagittarius is the beginning of the seed of the Sagittarian energy. That's when we plant the idea of whatever the long-term vision is. Saturn is about long-term vision. Saturn doesn't see the details. That's Virgo. Saturn squares Virgo. Virgo sees the details. You know, the Virgo thing, you can't see the forest for the trees. Well, in Sagittarius and the new moon in Sagittarius, you can't see leaves, you can't see trees. You can barely see the forest, you just see the universe. It's like you look at the big picture, the concept. Sagittarius is very much about long-term plans and big ideas, and the big ideas that drive us. This particular Sagittarius new moon is trying. I'm sorry. It's square to Venus, let me do that again. This new moon in Sagittarius is square to Neptune, which means that this new moon has an inherent danger and gift. It's the gift of imagination, fantasy, creativity, and dreams, but the danger is that we can think it's real. The other thing that's happening on that same day, and I said Venus by mistake earlier, is that we have, remember we talked about the Jupiter squaring Pluto just a few days prior, a week prior. But we have Venus now coming into a point where Venus, which lined up with Pluto, is now squaring Uranus. And you can see how Jupiter, Pluto, Venus, and Uranus, and yes, Eris is still in the picture, kind of make 3 points on a grand square, missing this point here. And I think that the days after Thanksgiving, as we get to the end of the month, and we have Venus square Uranus, and then we have the Sun actually forming the exact square to Neptune, I think the month ends on a strange note, both in personal relationships and globally, politically. I think there's something weird goes down, and again, it's Venus involved with Uranus. We learn something, again, whether it's a money scandal or some sort of something that's going on with extravagance. Jupiter's involved. Time will tell, and we will meet that week on the Wednesday after Thanksgiving, on November 30th, and we'll get to talk about what's going on real time. So, in summary, very quick summary, the craziness of October ain't over yet. You know, again, October started out normal, went completely off the rails. I think we have a few more rails left to lose. And of course, I'm saying that even though we're talking about November, I'm saying that tonight on October 26th. And I think, though, that by the time we get to Election Day, once we get this thing, this megalithic thing behind us, I think everything changes pretty damn quickly. And now how it changes will remain to be seen. But I think that once we're in November, it will feel like we've graduated, we've gotten through something, and we'll be resigned to going to where we're going next without being dragged through what we've been dragged through now for what seems like forever, but really has only been, you know, a half a year or so. Ugh. So, hang on to your hats. You know, we got new territory to discover and learn about next month. And I'll see you here at the end of the month. And remember, if you're thinking about doing India, send me an email, rlevine@stariq.com, S-T-A-R-I-Q, rlevine@stariq.com, because it will probably fill up by the end of November or beginning of December. Right now, airfares are good, and thank you all.
Thank you.